The genetic diversity of the black cottonwood trees contributes to its future in producing biofuels. But what drives this diversity? There are so many different mechanisms at play, but one of the major ones is natural selection. By natural selection, the organisms that adapt better to an environment thrive and pass on these beneficial traits on to their offspring. Thus, local adaptation causes trees in different environments to have genetic differences and traits that allow them to prosper in different climates. For instance, a type of black cottonwood tree that can endure extremely low temperatures will thrive in Alaska, but be less prevalent in hot Californian weather. Dr. Armando Graldes of the Biodiversity Research Center joins us now. His work focuses on studying the genetic diversity in black cottonwood trees. Dr. Graldes, what causes local adaptation in black cottonwood trees?
If a tree is locally adapted, it grows better in some environment than in a foreign environment. Does a tree from California grow better in California than it grows in Alaska? And does a tree from Alaska grow better in Alaska than it grows in California? And if that is true, then that suggests that they are locally adapted.
Can you explain how you determined that the populations had genetic differences and how you knew this was due to natural selection?
If you detect all of the genetic differences between individuals, you can there are ways of looking into the data that allow you to infer the action of natural selection. We looked for patterns of selection in those two different populations, and I think we found some fairly convincing, very convincing signatures of the action of natural selection that might tell us something about the biology of the species.
Dr. Graldes found that genes involved in the tree's ability to sense light varied between different trees due to natural selection. Sensing light allows the trees to produce leaves in the spring and form buds in the fall, so that they will survive the winter. Dr. Graldes, can you expand on the life cycle of the black cottonwood tree?
These are trees that in the spring they start flushing, so they start producing leaves, right? And they grow during the spring and the summer and close to the fall. And then they start dropping all their leaves. They form these buds, which are preformed leaves that are protected from the cold winter, so they're not going to freeze, they're not going to be damaged, and they're ready to expand as soon as conditions are right in the spring.
So forming buds at the right time protects the trees from damage during the winter. How does a tree know when to form the buds before winter and produce leaves in the spring?
The way that trees do that is by sensing day length. When they start growing, and they grow to a certain length, day length, they start flushing. They see the signal to flush. And when they start shortening in the fall, when they get to a critical, short day, then they start dropping their leaves and forming these buds, which is what's going to allow them to grow next year.
Interesting. So going back to the natural selection you observed in these light-sensing genes, why would different populations of trees adapt to have differences in their light-sensing genes?
So, if you think about it, trees in the north can only grow for a much shorter period than trees in the south, right? Because the first frost comes much, much earlier in the north, and the good conditions for growth, snow melt, for instance, and the last frost comes much later in the year. So they have to adjust, the way they perceive the sunlight, to get the right signal at the right time so that they don't get damaged and die.
So natural selection both leads to the genetic diversity of the black cottonwood trees and enables them to survive in different climates and habitats. Thank you, Dr. Graldes, for your insights.
You're welcome.
Credits to Vincent So, Lauren Coombe, Daniel Yan, and Gurvinder Sudan, and Dr. Armando Graldes.